Hi, welcome to Just Out of Curiosity, a podcast that talks about sex and sexuality from the lens of a sex-positive brown woman that has a fascination with alternative or non-conventional lifestyles. My name is Shelley D, and I am that sex-positive brown woman. Over the course of several episodes, I'm excited to dive into topics that titillate my interests and make me ask my guests questions, just out of curiosity. And so my curiosity today leads to, why do I think the way that I do? A large part of it is because of my dad. We have this father-daughter dynamic that I really haven't seen elsewhere. He too has a curious mind and approaches things he doesn't understand with questions instead of judgment. And while he was pretty tough on me as a father, and we have butted heads many a time even to this day, when I look back at how he raised me, he was always there. He was always willing to say goodnight to me when I was still upset with him. No matter how many times I was frustrated with him, I don't think I'd be half the person I am without him always trying to talk things out with me. I recognize that not everyone can have the same relationship that I have with my father. So here's my ability to talk with him and show where I came from, he came from. What can we do to hopefully mend that bridge that some children, especially daughters, may not be able to have with their fathers or with their parents, or in general, children and parent relationships? Hopefully this can help. I'm curious how he feels about having me as a daughter and talking about the ways he navigated the world growing up. And now, as someone who is a septuagenarian, try saying that a couple times fast, or just someone in their 70s, I think we've carved out a relationship that is pretty unique and open. Without further ado, here is my father. I'm also going to apologize in advance for the fast out because he got up the minute he thought he was done. Hi, Dad.
Hi, Shelley.
How does it feel being on your daughter's podcast?
I'm intrigued. I'm curious. And I'm just going to let everything unpack the way it could.
Yeah, is it weird that your daughter's doing a podcast on sex and stuff?
That is a little unusual, yes. But knowing you, I guess I'm not as surprised as I should be.
Why is it unusual?
Because you're willing to go out there and put yourself in a vulnerable position to talk about things that are important to you. And I'm proud of that.
Okay, well, I want to understand a little bit about you. So you weren't born here. How was your childhood? What was it like with your siblings, with your parents?
Well, I can't say it was traditional because my parents were fairly broad-minded, so they gave us a lot of leeway in what we wanted to do. I would say very liberal, but under no circumstance were they hard limits.
Wait, sorry, when you say liberal, like a liberal according to who or what?
Oh yeah, not liberal to Canadian standards, but liberal to the 1960s in Kenya, East Africa, which would be a very subdued version of England, but with a lot of opportunities and pursuits and endeavors that you could get into.
So then your childhood.
So my childhood, being the eldest, I guess I was always held responsible for my siblings. I was very much a late bloomer, so I really didn't come out and be the person I wanted to be or thought I could be until I was probably, 17, 18, 19. So a very subdued role in everything. Perhaps sports was about the only thing that I really did a lot on my own and felt very confident about. But everything else was always just one step back.
Why do you think that was?
It's probably more about me and not feeling I was in that upper quartile where I could step out and say, hey, here, this is who I am and this is what I want to be.
Really?
Yeah.
And it's so weird because you're such an extrovert.
Yes.
And you love socializing.
Yes. But that came with what I referred to earlier as me being a late bloomer.
So weird. This is not the Owen that I know.
Yeah, but once you get that confidence, once you feel that what you're doing is good and you can take on whatever obstacle is facing you, then you don't change.
But do you know what was that? Do you know that moment when you, like, what caused you to?
Yeah, there were probably a couple of moments. I think one of them. So a lot of the confidence I got was from playing sports,
Okay, yeah.
and it was mainly field hockey. I think when I first played for the second team of a very good club in Nairobi, Kenya, and I just got on the field, and all of a sudden it felt really comfortable, and I made a dribble, and I sort of beat a fullback, and I thought, whoa, and then from there just kind of took off. So the other important pursuit for me was my work life. And what happened was I managed to work for a Canadian CA, and he kind of took an interest in me, and he in more than one way, and often it was lifting me up, sometimes pushing me back and getting me to take a position. And all of a sudden I found, yeah, you know what, I can handle this. And I think from then on, it was any pursuit I took with the view to beating it, coming out on the better half rather than the worst half, aiming to always improve, and having the confidence to know I could improve.
Okay.
I don't think I ever told you that.
No, I don't think so. I don't think I've ever asked.
No.
Um, do you, okay, so there was a religious aspect to you growing up. You are Catholic and you went to a Catholic, was it a Catholic school or what was the?
Yeah, religion. Being Catholic in a school, because you had religion around you. You had, catechism classes. You had hymn singing.
That was in school though.
In school. Oh yeah.
Okay.
In school, and then there was going to mass with my parents. I certainly wasn't a good Catholic, but I did follow the requirements. So I met those, not always in the very best way. But it was very strong in our upbringing, more importantly, our society as well. So it was the things that we did, the club, the activities we went to, those religion was there. I mean, with just about, well, with many of the girls I went out with, they were Catholic. So you knew there was always a religious moral line there somewhere. Of course, being a guy, you'd push beyond the line, but then you would not push too much harder because you knew that there was religion involved.
So I'm guessing there wasn't as much promiscuity happening.
Well, they certainly were hot chicks around, but
that's not the same. Promiscuity doesn't mean hot chicks.
No, but generally, from a hot chick, you would expect someone to be more promiscuous.
So a hot chick as opposed to a hot woman? Like, why chick?
No, so chick.
That's what you said?
That was a phrase.
Okay.
That was just a phrase you used.
Okay.
A woman who was in those days. Remember, it was very much a male world. It was a macho world. It was always the man who had to make the first move, and if a woman made it, it was extremely unusual. So, when I say a hot chick, I'm talking about a woman who knew what she liked or knew what she wanted, and she was not afraid to step up or ask, recognizing that there was never a gender neutral phase. I mean, they would never be as assertive as I would be.
Because you were naturally assertive.
Well, and once I bloomed, absolutely.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. I didn't mean for you specifically. I just meant for like men in general at that time.
Yeah.
They were more assertive. That was the norm.
Definitely the norm. There was always that 20% of the guys who were very quiet and didn't be assertive. But I would say a number of guys would, and sadly, especially when I think back, and I use that word very carefully, sadly, uh, the the guys who were not verbally assertive were mentally assertive and psychologically assertive. And let me explain that. So even though they would not say it outright, they would think it. Oh, that girl should never have asked me for a dance. Oh, that girl should not have been dressing like that. But he would think it and not say it. Now, I wouldn't say go that far, but I would certainly say something.
To her or to him?
To her, to a girl, because we're talking about a male-female relationship.
Oh, sorry.
Now,
So
right?
I thought you were talking about, like, if a guy had said that to you about another woman, would you say anything to him?
So, okay, again, sadly, because now when I think back, I realized there were so many things we did that really didn't consider the woman, the female gender. We just thought about males and what we were and what we wanted and what we would like to get, but recognizing the limitations.
Yeah.
But so guys would often be talking about girls. And say, oh yeah, you could go with that one. That one looks interesting. Or that one dances clothes. I mean, dancing clothes, believe it or not, in those days was a big thing when you were starting off as a teenager.
So it's not the whining that you see now.
Whoa. This is like a bump and grind. So sometimes I would imagine a girl like nobody was dancing with her. So if someone went to dance with her, she would be very friendly and perhaps give out a little bit more in the hope that someone would come back. So that then would be deemed to be, like she was really pushing it.
Yeah.
Which is like I said, sad because we never really ever thought about the impact on the woman. So yeah, that's how guys would talk. And it was always about okay, pretty girls, attractive girls, girls who dressed well, girls who showed a little too much, and girls who showed maybe a little too little. And so if you went for a dance, or in those days we call them hop, like you call it a club now, not even a disco.
A hop.
Yeah, so a club, because the community was more closely connected, you would have a fairly good idea about the girls who were there, because you always be able to ask somebody, and somebody would tell you something. So a lot of what we would hear in terms of information about girls was not always accurate, but you kind of took it, which is stupid, but that's what you did.
Okay, so I think I've heard this a lot from men and probably women too. That way we treated each other back before was probably not as considerate as we could have been, especially towards the female species. Do you think that it was because we didn't talk enough, A, and no one taught us to actually like how to communicate with like how you can communicate with girls, how girls can communicate with boys, or just like foster having those kind of conversations instead of like, I'm trying to figure out where shaming comes from, or why sometimes we resort to shaming, or
So explain shaming to me.
so shaming is okay. So in the case of a cock tease,
Yeah.
right? She just wanted to look good. In her mind, she was looking her best self. And whether or not it was like a tight dress, a short dress, a dress that showed a little bit too much cleavage, she looks good and she's confident in what she's wearing. She doesn't consider anything else. But when she goes out to the hop and there are men that are looking at her and they're like, oh, I think she's a slut, or I think she'll put out easy. I think she's easy. It immediately goes to like the worst things, and you're shaming her for looking the way she does.
Okay.
I'm not necessarily saying in specific, like this specific
Fair
example, but I think sometimes that's also the reason why we don't, like, you look back and you say, I sadly wish that I could have done something better, but I don't think we actually encourage people to talk to the opposite sex, or just
So it possibly was that. I would say it was probably more about the fact that neither men or women, or young men, young women, were sexually mature.
Oh yeah, there's that too.
And also, there wasn't enough of knowledge about sexuality. What should men appreciate about women's sexuality, and vice versa. Also, about the phases of sex, whether it was, I'd say, getting off first base or second base, and I think you understand those concepts. But we're not very clear about them, and the messaging wasn't that good. Now, mind you, I say that, and then I hear and watch on TV or movies what goes on now, and I, the messaging I don't think is always that clear.
No, I think we're still sexually immature.
Yeah, except that where we would be sexually immature was before the actual sexual act, and I'm not counting the fondling and the foreplay that goes on, but from the point of view of the sexual act, we had no clue.
Yeah.
Whereas I think now, because sex is much more prevalent and is not considered a shameful thing to do, but in many cases is a natural thing to do, we would never be getting there. So in many ways, we were very immature with that. And so the assertive guys, so someone like me, would push the line. I mean, I knew where the line was. And if I didn't get a no, I proceeded further until I got a no, and then I would always be testing that. But it was, I mean, at this stage, we're still talking second, third base, no more than that.
Right. Do you think you never had any sex education when you were in school, did you?
No, no. I probably learned I probably got my sex education on the job, if you wish you call it.
I think that's how most people get their sex education. I don't agree with that at all, but
No.
okay, so you were a player back in the day?
Yeah, I guess I was. Yeah, I guess I was. I was always fascinated with a woman. I found that I could appreciate different kinds of women. They didn't have to fit a particular role model. So there was always that inquisitive is not the best word, but the word I'll use right now. It was an inquisitive nature, but trying to get to know that person a little bit more. And the only way you could is if you went out with them, right?
Yeah.
And so it wasn't just about sex. It was about conversations and discussions and sharing and things. And I guess in those days, I also always had that dream of wanting to make sure I found the right person. So I was never afraid if I saw a woman that attracted me. She didn't have to be attractive, but attracted me.
Yeah.
Made me sort of perk up my head and say, hey, that's something interesting. So it was always because I found someone intriguing and I said, okay, I don't want to worry about what ethnicity, color, religion she was. I probably dated just about everyone. Yeah, I did.
Oh, you went around the world.
Well, not around the world.
Well,
I mean, in the world that was...
You tasted the rainbow. Well...
Oh, certainly, yeah. Certainly.
I laugh when I say tasted because you know what third base is, right?
Yes. Well, yeah. Yeah, but a taste could also be a second base. It could be a kiss.
Okay, yeah, let's do Okay, yeah. That makes more sense. So you weren't necessarily a player because you wanted to get all the women. You were playing because you wanted to find your wife.
I wanted to find my life mate.
Yeah.
Yes, I wanted to find my life mate, and I was not afraid to go out and check out something. So, I always tried to figure out what was the difference between love and lust. And I was always afraid of marrying for lust because that's not going to last very long. And for me, marriage was lifelong.
Did you find yourself in lust with the other women?
Oh, absolutely. Oh, yeah.
So then what was...
Well, that was what, but that's why I figured I needed to make sure I understood my feelings. Because if I was interested in someone else, then clearly the first person was not.
But did you ever
the right
give any of
person.
those women a chance, though?
Oh, I did. Oh, yes, I did.
There's just too many options.
We were not, I was not a ship passing another in the night. That's an old expression.
Yes.
Yeah, we were not passing ships in the night.
What is... I want to ask what that means, but don't give me a long-winded answer.
No.
Okay.
Basically, well, there's another expression. It was not a fly-by-night. You know what that means? So not a hit and run.
Oh.
Okay.
Is that what ships pass in the night do? They do.
What ships pass at night, they don't. They see each other, and then they've gone,
going, okay.
and they don't always remember everything about the other ship.
I feel like that's how men in general work. Heterosexual men, maybe even homosexual men. I don't know. Maybe that's just a man thing.
Well, explain that a bit.
It feels like that hasn't changed. The way what you're talking about, like how you would go from woman to woman because you were trying to figure it out, but I truthfully don't know if you were actually giving it any chances or what chance you were actually giving it. But that notion of like skipping from woman to woman while you're trying to figure out is something that I still think is very prevalent in the single dating pool. Because it was always that every time I would try to find a guy, as much as I was still on dating apps, they would still be always like dating other women as well. And then always constantly telling me, oh, we're just casual.
Yeah.
And it's just like, but you're not even giving this a chance. You just want to stay. I feel like a lot of them want to stay single.
Yeah, and you know, if I reflect on that, on what you just said, it's possible, it's very possible that the woman would have felt I didn't give her enough of a chance.
I guess, but then you found mom.
Yeah. So then
What was the clicker there that made you want to settle down?
It was extremely unusual. Unusual from the standpoint that by now I figured I knew what I wanted. I think the one thing that mom did was she said no to me a lot, and I was not used to. I was not used to women saying no to me.
So weird.
And all of a sudden with mom, because it was rejection, it was no, and so I would try harder, and it was still rejection. I would try even harder, and then we just started to connect a little bit more. And I thought, okay, well, she actually agreed to come out with me, and as soon as we did, I think I certainly realized that this was a woman I could share my life with, and I probably came close and interestingly enough, with mom, it was a feeling of comfort, a feeling of stability. It was a feeling of me saying, yes, I could definitely spend my life with her.
Aww. That's so cute. Okay, so you end up getting married to mom. She moves to Canada. She gets pregnant. Did you find out the sex of your child? Or was it a surprise?
No, we actually both made a conscious decision that we didn't want to. And in fact...
Why?
Because
was that a big thing back then? I don't think anyone really... Did people want to know?
We wanted to be part of that whole experience of having a child. And so we actually painted your room yellow. You don't know that.
Oh,
you probably do remember. Yeah. It was the old house, and we actually painted it yellow, which is an in between blue and pink. We said, let's go for something.
Yeah, that's fine. I'm
and
okay
then from
with
there
that.
we could change the colors if we so needed.
Well, that's how it really should be.
Yeah, for us, having a child was all of the experience. We didn't want any of it to be scientific, because for us we recognized that having a child was the most important part of having a child was the emotions and the love.
Mm-hmm. So when you found out that I was born, because I was the oldest, what did fatherhood do to you with having a baby daughter?
Oh my gosh, all kinds of emotions.
And you're an emotional person too, so.
Yes, I am. Just having having a child and saying, "Oh my gosh," like my wife and me made this baby. This is ours. And then being a girl, it was, oh my God, I gotta protect her. And my thoughts at that stage was more making sure I looked after her and made sure that she would have as many chances as she could get and not be limited by society's choices of how they looked at the woman.
Did you think that there would be limitations on me as a woman, as your daughter?
Well, I always tried to make sure that you were never put in a position where you were not the first choice because you were a girl.
Do you think that happened?
Oh, everywhere.
Oh, I mean, obviously, yeah, it did happen. I just don't know.
Oh, in everything you did. If and in a playground, if I went to the playground with you, I would make damn sure that no boys would come in and step in front of you in a line when you're waiting to take your ride. And if they did, I jump right in.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I mean, don't you remember that time when you were in school and you came back and you're very excited about going for labs, and you came back and you were very upset, and I was waiting to find out how you did with the labs.
When you say lab, like in science class?
Yeah, and
Okay.
and what happened was the teacher said, okay, the guys are going to mix the chemicals and the girls are going to take the notes. Do you remember that?
No, but vaguely.
And I said, the hell with that. And I said, I'm coming to school, and you were trying to calm me down. There was no way I was going to get calm with that. And I walked into school, and I walked into the door, and she was a woman. So I remember saying this. I still vividly remember this. I looked at us and introduced myself, and I said, I'm standing here, and I'm asking myself, why am I even having to come and talk to you? You are a woman, a Caucasian woman. I'm an immigrant man understanding Canadian society, and I have to come to you to ask you what in heaven's name was in your head when you decided that boys were going to mix the chemicals and the girls are going to take the notes. And I just leaned right into it. And I said, okay, so I'm going to be fair about this. The next lab you do, the girls had better be doing the chemicals and the boys had better be doing the notes, or this is going all the way up to the school board.
How old was I?
You were probably grade 5, I would
don't
say.
remember this.
You don't remember that?
No. But I very much appreciate that you did that.
Oh, I was so upset. Jeez.
I mean, I remember. Sorry, go on.
But that's examples of that. So there were all kinds of things because gender neutrality was not even a phrase when you were growing up.
Not at all.
So it was everything, Charles. It was when we went to a game and the guys would be yelling and you'd be saying, please sit down, and they would ignore you, and I'd just tap them on the shoulder and said, hey, she's asking you to sit down because she can't see. She's paid for the same ticket that you have. You need to listen to her. And yeah, I got into a couple of confrontations because I was very, very firm about that, and I would take on other people. And I remember having a discussion with one of the fathers. He said, oh, you were being very rough with my child. I said, yeah, so here's the important thing. You said your child was a boy, and this is my child who's a girl. And as far as I'm concerned, they have the same rights, and they have the same views to what they should be having, and equality should be number one. So are we going to take this further? There are 2-3 situations like that. I often got into
I remember I remember certain things that happened. I don't know. It's just it's fascinating. Like, why were you the person that was doing it and everyone else couldn't get it, or were they just all had sons and no one got it?
Well, I wouldn't say everyone else didn't get it. But I certainly think I was in the minority.
Yeah.
Well, I guess 2 things. One was, I guess as you said, being a player. As I grew up, and especially when I became a parent, I began to think about all the things I did when I was younger, and how I never really gave the woman or the girl a chance, as much of a chance as I should have. And so then this was my way of trying to reciprocate and even things out through you. That was one. Second is I'm an assertive person, so I'm not going to stand back and see a right being wronged and not make an attempt to change it.
Mm-hmm. But so there was also, and maybe this was because you had that relationship with your mother where you talked to her about stuff. I know I may not have been the most forthcoming, although it was weird for me to talk to my parents, especially my father, about boys and stuff. But like, you were always like you were these two different types of people. You were the cool dad, and all my friends liked you. You got along with anyone. You're pretty much relatable to anyone from any age, which was great. I really like that about you. I've always actually appreciated that about you. And then you were also were trying to be really open with me talking about boys and sex. And so I remember, I may not necessarily remember you standing up for me in grade 5 science class, but every single March break, there would always be a day.
I remember that.
I couldn't forget because I didn't want it to happen. There was at least one day where you would spend the day with me. And it'd be cool. We'd go do something downtown probably.
Yeah.
But then there would always be the dreaded car ride home where there'd always be some questions that you would ask me. And I never, ever wanted to answer them, but you would always ask them. And the thing is, now I look back at it, and I'm like, that's actually really admirable. I actually really appreciate that you did that. When I was younger, I did not. But looking back, I think that was part of the reason why I think we have as close a relationship as possible, like amongst other things, but that helped with it because you were always willing to talk and listen, even if I didn't want to do it.
Yeah, I don't know if you remember this one question, because it was always, it was difficult getting this kind of conversation going, and that's why I don't regard a challenge as being something you avoid. I regard a challenge as something you need to take on and either overcome it or, worst case, compromise with it, but at least take it on in some way, shape, or form. So when I was pushing you for questions, I would ask you things, and then life kinds of things, and then try and relate it back into sex and boys, because I wanted to make sure that when you were growing up, there would be no doubt about some of the issues you would have to deal with. You know, guys pushing themselves on you, forcing you to do things you don't want to do, and I didn't want you to be ignorant about those things, because that's the worst kind of experience to have. Because what do you do then? So I said to her, I said, so things must be going on. When they started sex education in school, I went to the school and I got a copy because I said, and they were giving me a hard time, and I said, no, I want to know what you're teaching my daughter, because if she comes home and she has questions, I need to know what the context is.
Would you have been against them teaching anything specific?
No, because Shelley, at that stage, we were still thinking. So now you're probably So on this question, let me tell you about the question. So Sorry. Eventually I said, okay, so what do you know about contraception? And you kind of just looked at me and your eyes went like wide open. And I said, yeah, so do you know about contraception and things that are going on? What do you guys talk about in school with that? And I couldn't get much more, so I explained it as best as I could, because I said, okay, I have to leave this here, and then hopefully she'll pick it up sometime later, and then we'll have another conversation. Yeah. But when you were much younger, Shelley, you came home all excited. You said, Dad, I know how you have children. I said, yeah, okay, so tell me what it is. She says, well, Mom and you just go to sleep, and the next day you have a child.
Who taught me that?
That was the kind of thing I was trying to avoid by having these more insightful conversations.
Yeah, but would you have been upset if they talked about like intercourse?
No, because I think you needed to know this, Shelley. So now at this stage, when we got to this question, you were probably, I don't know, I'm having to guess now, probably 8 to 10. Well, we would hear stories about young adolescents, 13 and 14, being pregnant. And I swore to myself, I would make damn sure that you wouldn't be one of those, not fond of because you wouldn't have the opportunities, but because you were ignorant of what sex was and how you could become pregnant.
Well, your favorite saying to me when I was growing up was that you didn't want me to have babies until I was 30.
I don't know. I don't remember that.
Well, maybe it was like you didn't want me to get married until I was 30, which meant I wasn't having kids until 30. Well, I mean, I go into this a lot with you, but then there was always that you make one wrong mistake and then that ruins you for the rest of your life.
That's what I used to often say to you.
I didn't like that though. Eventually it got to a point where it was just like, that is so one-sided. You're so okay with Corey having sex and you're okay with that. You're okay with everyone else having sex, but somehow your 25-year-old daughter shouldn't be having sex because she could get pregnant and she would have to be a single mom for her life, as if that's the end of my life.
Well, I'm assuming at that stage you know about safe sex. So if you're going to have it, at least have safe sex. With Corey, I always talk to your brother about making sure that the way he was using
You never
protection.
had a conversation with me about using protection. You just told me not to have sex.
Well, but it was always with the thought that you would at least
someone
have
who
protection.
That
I don't know, Shelley. Yeah.
Dad. It never came out of your mouth to use protection. It was just, don't have sex. Don't have sex. You're going to get pregnant. Don't have sex. Don't come home at 3 o'clock in the morning. You're going to get pregnant. Don't have sex. That was all you said.
So obviously there was a failure to communicate.
Yes. I mean, I still had sex, so it was
Of
protection though.
Did.
Okay, like the last little bit on you as a parent. If you could give perspective as a father with 2 adult kids, or with like a daughter, maybe the oldest daughter, what would you give? What would it be?
So advice about what?
Just like your perspective of, I think you've done a really good job ultimately as a father with me as a daughter.
Well, what I would say is to the kids, to the younger people, try and include your parents in your education about life and life experiences. And I'm sure I've told you this, and especially after that business about going to sleep and having a baby the next time. And I think I actually said to you, I said, so Shelley, this is why it's important for us to talk, because what you're hearing from your peers is not always the best information. And that's because they're limited. It's not because they're stupid or they're ignorant, but they just don't have the experiences to deal with situations. So try and involve your parents. It can be very hard, but I mean, I look at what you did, I look at my relationship with my mom, and I try to emulate that and always want to get better. And I love the relationships we have, but we wouldn't have them if I didn't encourage you to talk to us, and then more importantly, leave bridges for you to cross to come back to me and talk to me. And that's what I would say to all the young people growing up. Involve your kids, because a lot of the decisions that you're going to face are going to be life decisions. They're not about what you find in academic books or what you find on the internet, but life experiences. And from people who have your best interests at heart, and who better than your parents?
Yeah.
And I'd say that, and I would also say that I think one thing I've tried very hard to do is not judge someone from how they look. I mean, if anything, being, as you call it, being a player, and be willing to connect with someone of a different race, color, religion, views. It gives you an amazing amount of experience, an amazing insights on how you can try and deal with situations in the future, not just from the one perspective, because life is not another single dimension. It's multi-dimensional, and that's why you need that.
What about for parents?
Oh, for parents,
especially now, like in today, I know today's society is a little bit different, but
I would say to parents, the parents need to have the kids experience some of these things, and what you have to do is you got to become a bit of a kid yourself, because when they're young is when you're going to make the link, build the bridges, and you can't do it as an adult. You got to do it as a kid. That's how they're going to connect with you. And then as they grow and you grow, you see the changes. You have to find ways. You got to get to know your children really well. Like you got to be able to understand what they're doing and what they like and what they don't like. I still remember playing computer games with Corey, and Mom was crazy. Why are you teaching all this stuff? I said, "Hon, this is his game. This is his world. This is what he loves. So for me to get in there with him, I need to be able to play with him."
I remember my grade 12 teacher. I remember I said one time, I don't know what we were talking about, but I was like, yeah, my dad was playing this video game. And Mr. Pratt looked up at me. He's like, your dad plays video games? I'm like, yeah. And he plays all night. He doesn't even know what time I come home at night sometimes. And he never forgot it. And he thought you were the coolest person because you played video games. There's reasons why I want to do this podcast. Felt like, no, not A. Sorry. So I like to model it after you. You are a big inspiration for me doing this podcast. I don't know if I've told you this, but I've seen how you and your opinions and perspectives have changed with awareness. Like I'm going to use your gay friend at work as an example, but I feel like you had a perception of gay people in your head. You never knew any. I don't think you knew any gay people before.
No, that was my very first.
And so I think you had a perception of what a gay person was in your head, being that super flamboyant, that guy at Pride who like wears next to no clothing and makes out with everyone, whatever that stereotypical vision of in your head was. I feel like that was it. And someone that would like threaten your masculinity or your heterosexuality and like,
Or in some cases, and I hate to say this, but it was true, offend my masculinity.
why offend?
Well, because remember where you grew up, male gays were a travesty of life. It was a wrong thing to do, and they shouldn't be doing this. And why they should behave like normal people. That was the thinking in those days.
So where did that thinking come from? Do you think it came from religion or culture?
Oh,
Everything?
everything. It was religion. It was culture. It was society.
Wow.
Oh yeah.
But just to think that like being gay offends masculinity is such a
Yeah.
sorry, it's
Absolutely.
as such a stereotypical negative way of thinking of gay men as you thinking that every gay person is that flamboyant or people thinking that.
Well, and the reaction in many cases was if you wanted to physically confront a gay guy because he was that different. And I mean, and didn't we learn anything about how different people are who they are, and they all have their own ways of looking at life, and how we all need to integrate and connect with each other? But that seemed to go away when gay sexuality came into the picture. It was always, and it was either an offense to masculinity, or it was a joke. You laughed at them, you ridiculed them, you minimized them because you never wanted anything like that to be anywhere near you.
Looking back at that, do you think
horrible.
now? I know it is it's terrible, but did you think that homosexuality existed before?
It did. I mean, we knew of rare cases, but then the poor guys never would have had a chance to come out because there would have been a firestorm around them.
Yeah.
But with Peter, my office colleague, and it was one of my other colleagues. So you're spending a lot of time with him. You do know he's gay, and she was a very straight Italian woman, like family life and all that kind of stuff. And I was so flabbergasted. I didn't know what to say or do. And I came back. I think I talked to Mom, and I talked to you. I think I don't know if I talked to you guys. I was in turmoil. And then it was like late at night. I just all of a sudden a thought hit me. So what's different about Peter? You were great friends. We just enjoyed each other's company so much. We did all kinds of stuff. So just because he's gay means you don't like him anymore?
Yeah, it means absolutely
And
nothing.
as soon as that hit me, I went the next day. I said, "Hey, Pete, I got to talk to you." So then I said, "By the way, I understand you're gay." And the first thing he said to me is, he says, "You were not ready to accept me." And I felt very disturbed. I felt very insulted. And insulted is not a great word.
But you were uncomfortable.
No, because I felt, my God, I mean, I thought I understood people and I wanted to accept and appreciate people for who they are. And if I presented myself like that, uh, without knowing it, then I'm as guilty as a lot of other people. And he said that to me. But I did push him. And what he said to eventually was, he said, "But Owen, it was just the way you talk, and the values that you have, and how you reach certain decisions. There was no place for a gay person in your life." And I kept on saying, "But Peter, I'm here with you. Like, what the heck are you talking about?" But that made me really, really realize that it's just another aspect of a human being that you've got to now appreciate and recognize and accept, and more importantly, work with. Like, you've got to compromise something about where you are and adjust what you are to accommodate that, because if you don't, you're missing so much of life.
Yeah, because it's when you said that you weren't ready. No, it wasn't even that you said, but it was when I realized that there's lots of things that you don't know that you don't know. Like
Yes.
you focus so much on things that you know, and you spend all that time with it. It's very familiar and it's very comfortable for you, and then you forget that there's other people out there that may not follow in the same kind of way of being, and then you don't realize that they ever existed. You don't realize that all the things that you were doing excluded them as well, to an extent.
Absolutely. Exclusion, and exclusion with a lot of negative sentiment.
Okay, so I don't want to trigger you, but this is essentially what the patriarchy, when we talk about patriarchal society, how it excludes women, it's from that kind of perspective. Can you understand how that is? Because it's when you have men in charge of, and it's not you, it's just in general, take the same thinking that you had with how you excluded homosexuality from your purview of thinking about the world, and then you didn't realize that you had excluded it so much until you met someone. What it means to live in a patriarchal society is that you have a very predominant way of thinking, and it comes from men, right? Like, men are the leaders, men are doctors, men are lawyers, men are judges. And it's changing now, but what society started off with, right? Like the beginning of Canada, how it was founded and formed in North America too, right? It was all men. Everything was written by men.
Yeah.
It excluded women from it for a large time, and women were put into positions of either being owned by men, because essentially there was, in the States, I believe, there was no, women weren't citizens until much, much later. They were property of men. But everything that happened when laws were made, when school books were written, when medicine was being looked at, women were being excluded from it. And so to live in a patriarchal society means this is how it was started, and we're trying to change that. But when it says exclusion of women and not allowing them into that power structure, can you understand now where more of that comes from?
Well, I can, except I would say that things are evolving so quickly. I said this to you once before. My last 6 bosses, people I directly reported to, were women. I had one guy.
But that's just you, like, that's just like that's the government. That's one thing that you did. I can tell you from my perspective, like, even just look at, and maybe this is just how I feel about this in general, but when the vaccines for COVID, and all those vaccines were being made and people were getting the first round, women were saying that they were either missing their periods or their periods were really heavy. Something was getting thrown off after they got vaccinated. And I started asking a bunch of people, and no one could quite understand it. No one can tell me anything. When I went to get my second dose, I had a male nurse. And I was asking him about it. He was like, "Yeah, it's this weird phenomenon that we don't quite understand." And I'm sitting here like, it's 2021. You made this vaccine, or not you, but this vaccine was made in 2020, say. And if women make up more than 50% of the population, you still can't tell me what's happening to women. Like, you're not thinking about women's reproductive systems when you're making a medicine or vaccine. Like, that's what it feels like to be excluded from something.
And so that's what I'm going to say to you is women have to become a lot tougher. Like those women bosses that I had, I know how much they struggled to get there. They had to be 150% better than any of their male.
Which, to an extent, though, that's not fair.
No, it's not. It's not. But I think in many ways, when I saw how good they were, because all of a sudden I'm dealing with a boss who was much better than any other male boss, because that's what she had to be my boss. And then I would look at what she did and how she did it, and how even-handed she was. And there weren't these, ridiculous little things. Well, I guess everyone eventually has them, but there weren't these ridiculous little rules that you had to follow to be in with the guys, kind of thing, which I saw in spades in my earlier lives. And I didn't see it with them, and I'm thinking, this is unusual. This is nice, and so I treated them well, and I got on so well with all of them. I couldn't believe it. And I remember when I left, my two other bosses came in to present me with my retirement, and they all talked about it, and it was quite amazing. And one of them said to me, she says, what was so unusual is that you treated me like a boss. You didn't treat me like a woman boss. And I said, I don't know any other way to do it. But that is how we evolve. And then give the men a chance to change, because you do eventually need them on your side, because the more numbers you have, the better it's going to be.
Okay, yeah, no, I agree with you. It's that fine line with getting men on your side, because when the context to me asking you about patriarchy is when we first started talking about it, you got very defensive and thought that I was attacking you personally, I feel like. And I was trying to say it's not. It's an ideology, which means this is just like the prevalent thinking, like that, like overarching thought that is kind of running through in every single thing, like even TV. And you got very defensive.
Well, yeah, I got defensive because I felt you were putting me in a box and categorizing me as this male who excludes women. I can understand more about it now because we've had two cuts at this.
Yeah.
But still, the point is, some men will change more than others, just like every human being changes in different ways. Patriarchy, actually, I get offended with the word patriarchy because that's just another form of discrimination.
It is.
And it's a huge form. It's like half the world.
It is, yeah.
And when you have that much of power, the other side, which are the women in this case, don't have a lot of chance to fight it, because the power and influence and contacts are all super strong and very, very high up.
Yeah.
Filtering all the way down. So they support up and down the line.
Well, then you also, so that you mean, we've been talking very cisgendered ways by saying men and women, and then you also add trans people as well into it.
Yeah.
And it makes it even more harder because some people can't even understand patriarchy, and then you start talking about multiple genders, and it's even harder for people to understand, because as much as you say that you were living in a world that when you were growing up was anti-homosexual, we're now in a world where it's not anti-trans, but it's very, very hard for people to wrap. They have to comprehend it first, and then they have to be okay with it in order for that person to be, or in order for trans people to exist. It feels like.
Yeah, and it's a difficult life. I mean, when I think back to where we were, life was so much more simpler. But maybe what we have to do in this world, in 2022, is we need to have these different groups be able to express themselves and become a little more public. And I don't know how you do that. But for me to understand, like I still have questions, lots of questions. I use you often as a bouncing board because I'm actually saying, Shelly, I don't know what to do. Mm-hmm. How do I deal with this person? And my fallback, and you often say that that's probably the best way, and maybe that is a solution, is don't try and figure it out. Just take what you see. What you see is what you get. Take what you see and deal with that.
Yeah.
If you can be open enough to ask a genuine question without trying to figure out whether it's politically correct or whether it hints of a hidden agenda, just ask the question, get an answer, accept the answer, doesn't matter from what source, and then start to work with it. Okay, so what do I do with this now? Do I change? Do I adapt? Do I ignore? And that's how I think we need to come to grips with this, because I don't know what else. I mean, I would see less of the LGBTQ community, and
you said that right.
And yeah, I mean, you thought you hammered it in my
I know,
head
but
long
sometimes.
enough. But it's right now. It's mainly with the younger generations. So, in a way, you guys could say, look, let's just forget about the older generation because there's going to be too much for them to handle, and they're going to eventually die off, and then we'll be in charge. But I think we need to find as many of the opportunities to share it, and not be afraid of it, because the question I'll say to any of these, I will call them minority groups, is what are your choices? If you either express yourself and say who you are, or you hide.
But I don't think that they aren't doing that. I think, unfortunately, the younger generation is the one that's trying to, I think there's probably a good chunk of them that are trying to push for inclusivity and diversity. And then there's some that also resist as well. But unfortunately, at this moment in time, we're still at the mercy of that older generation that may or may not want to change and adapt. Some of them are, but a lot of those politicians, if you look especially at like right-wing, traditional, conservative politicians, don't want to. And as a result, it makes it harder to make those changes.
I agree, but again, I'll come back to you and say, so what are your choices? You say, okay, fine, I can't do anything. I'm just going to, I'll do what a little I can and not do any more. You're losing potentially supporters. Like, I am prepared to accept minority groups of whatever they are, but I need to understand who and what they are and what is it they want. And I mean, for me, my interaction with them will be a lot less, because how often do I come in contact with them? But it makes a difference in the conversations I'm having with my peers. Because I say, well, listen, you think about this. Why don't you think about this? And because remember, these are also grandparents. And grandparents are the ones with the most amount of time. Who do they have time for? The kids. And if kids are growing up and they have grandparents, at least who's okay, that's not that's not a stupid thing. That's maybe who that child is. They may be able to help them.
Well, I guess that's the biggest thing that we can ask for, I guess, as the younger generation, are allies like you and other, like anyone really. So when you hear any kind of negative talk, you don't necessarily have to tell the person that they're wrong, but you can also help at least make it more palatable. I don't know.
Give them a different view.
Yes.
Give them a different view and say, listen, don't think that your view is the right view. Think of this one, and if you don't accept this, what are you losing? Because if it's a grandchild, they're losing a grandchild. If they're going to say, oh no, that's a guy and he should not be wearing girls' clothes, you're just losing a grandchild. So what are you going to do with that grandchild? You're going to ignore the grandchild?
Yeah. Those
are the things that they can do. And sometimes the grandchildren, when they grow up, I mean, I see wonderful stories of grandchildren relating with grandparents. I mean, why go farther? My father gets phone calls from grand nieces and nephews who talk about buying a house or doing this and doing that, because and so he gives them comfort or advice or whatever support they want. and he accepts them, which is wonderful. So, but that's where the old generation is helpful, and the young generations who are trying to explain themselves and express themselves and find a place in society should not ignore these people, because they can be of value.
Well, that's partly why I'm doing this podcast.
Yeah, I know.
And I feel like at this point I can say you're an ally.
I'll go with that.
Yeah?
Yeah, I'll go with that.
Okay. Would you come to Pride?
I need some support around me. So just like in anything, if you go to a bar, you don't drink the strongest possible drink you have. You
Right.
work your way up. Right?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
that's what I would need. So I would be willing to come to a Pride parade, but I would like to be with the sort of the middle crowd.
Yeah.
And
fine.
express my support, and then maybe eventually I'll work to the stronger fringe elements, for
Right.
want of a better word.
But I mean, still, the fact that at one point in your life, you thought that homosexuality offended you as a man, as a straight man, to where you are now is very impressive. And I mean, it feels like that people are very capable of change. They just need the right education and the right awareness and the right people to help them guide their way through it.
Yeah, so rather than make me a hero, consider the fact that there's a lot of people who think that what we need is children that we have good connections with, like you with me, explaining these things and saying that, but it's not the right way to look at it. Or how about this way? And of course, because I'm assertive, I'm just not going to accept whatever you say right away. I'll want to understand it, which means we have a discussion. And so the younger people should start to try and have discussions with older people, or with parents, grandparents, relatives, rather than not. And if they do, all of a sudden you're going to probably find that a lot of people will change, because as I keep on saying often, look how much you're losing if you don't stay with mainstream, if you don't see what's happening around you and get involved. I mean, you can sit back and be an armchair critic. And what good is that? Criticism is not the most pleasant experience there is. I would rather be something positive and uplifting, or have a great experience meeting someone that from a minority group that I could actually understand. I remember some of the conversations I had with some of your gay friends, and it was actually quite a very enjoyable evening, a very enjoyable conversation. But I would not have had it if you hadn't brought them, because I would not be able to connect with them easily.
Yeah.
Because I wouldn't know how. And I wouldn't always have the right medium to get to a location where I can.
So right now, I know that you have me as a daughter trying to teach you all the things, but what is your biggest struggle that you have with all the progress, all the progression that has been made?
In society?
Yeah.
With all these all the new groups that are coming out to present themselves?
Yeah.
It's probably, my greatest fear is my ignorance.
Well, I mean, I didn't really ask you what your fear was, but did I ask?
Yeah,
Struggle.
I think my struggle is my
Just
ignorance.
ignorance in general?
Because if you're ignorant, you cannot come to a conclusion. You can't connect the information that's there, or the people or the experiences or what they're saying, and feed them in to yourself, because you don't know. So you're going to make incorrect judgments, decisions, conclusions, because you don't know. I mean, imagine picking up someone from the street and say, okay, now you go and cook, and the guy's never held utensils in his hand.
Yeah.
He's going to make a complete mess, and he's going to not understand things that he should be understanding. Worst of all, not know what he doesn't know.
You're very introspective.
Yeah. Oh,
This is a different side of my father. I'm used to the other sides. Would you be open to coming back on and doing another episode? I'm putting you on the spot because you're being recorded right now. Let's see, like, so I say to talk about, like, I don't know, as like for you to ask questions and then I try to answer them, or with someone else try to answer them.
Oh, that would be adventurous.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm up for that.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I'll ask a question. They're going to be dumb questions.
Well, I
because-
mean, you have to start somewhere. They're
Yeah.
not dumb. They're just, you don't know. And instead of the toxic, hostile environments that you may get from social media or elsewhere, I'm hoping that this is just a safe space where you can do it and not have any worries about that.
Okay.
I would like, that is ultimately where I would love this podcast to go. But, okay. I feel like this has been a good conversation.
Yeah, it has actually.
Yeah? You liked it?
I don't know. Maybe when I hear it again, I'll sort of connect because you charted the course.
Yeah.
So, but I think you were certainly surprised at some of the things that I said. And
I think so.
I was quite intrigued with that.
Well, thank you for taking the time to sit with me.
Like I haven't before.
You don't have much of a choice either. Okay, we can get you out of this hat and these clothes that you're wearing right now. All right, bye, Dad.
Bye, Sam.
I would like to thank you for tuning in today. Download, leave a review, follow, and share this episode and the podcast with your friends, family, really whomever you like. You can find me on Just Curiosity Pod on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and you can email me at justcuriositypod@gmail.com, as I would absolutely love to know your thoughts, insights, comments, and all those juicy stories. But most of all, stay curious, friends. I'm Shelly D, and this has been Just Out of Curiosity.